I never thought the person I loved most could hurt me so deeply. My own son, the boy I raised, the one I stayed up nights for, looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Dad, your money is my money." I was shocked, heartbroken, and angry all at once. I couldn't believe that after everything I sacrificed, everything I worked for, he would treat me like I was nothing more than a wallet. He threatened me, tried to manipulate the bank, spread lies about my sanity to friends and family, and even took legal action against me, claiming I was incompetent to handle my own life. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and afraid, but I refused to let him win. I fought back with every fiber of my being, proved my competence, protected my family, and finally saw karma catch up with him. This is a story about greed, betrayal, and the power of standing up for yourself even when it feels impossible. You won't believe this, but my own son looked me in the eyes and said, "Dad, your money is my money." Can you imagine? After everything I sacrificed for him, all the nights I stayed up working 2 jobs, all the times I went without so that he could have more, he now believes that what I work for belongs to him automatically. That was the moment I realized something had to change. And yes, I changed my entire bank account because of it. Let me take you back a bit. I'm a 67-year-old man, recently retired. I've been a widower for 7 years now. My wife, Linda, passed away from cancer, and ever since then I've tried to keep the family together. I thought I was doing a decent job. We had 2 kids, my daughter, Sarah, who's always been respectful and caring, and my son, Michael, who, well, let's just say he's always had a taste for shortcuts. When Linda was alive, she used to tell me, "Don't spoil him too much. He needs to learn responsibility." I thought I was just helping him, being a good dad, you know? He struggled in college, so I paid for his classes. He wanted a new car, so I co-signed. He said he needed help with rent, so I wrote the checks. At the time, it felt like support. But now, I realized maybe I was enabling him. Fast forward to last Thanksgiving. The whole family was over at my house. The turkey was in the oven, the grandkids were playing in the living room, and for a moment, it felt warm again, almost like the old days when Linda was still with us. But then, in the middle of dinner, Michael dropped a bomb. Out of nowhere, he said, "Well, when Dad passes, we all know the money is mine." I laughed at first. I thought it was a bad joke, but he didn't laugh. He leaned back, folded his arms, and said, "I mean, come on. I'm his son. I'll take care of things. Sarah doesn't need much. She has her husband to provide for her. But me? Dad's savings are basically my retirement plan." The table went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. My daughter's face went pale, and her husband almost choked on his wine. And I sat there stunned. My own son, announcing like it was already written in stone that my life's work belonged to him. I tried to keep calm. I said, "Michael, that's not how this works. That money is mine, and it's meant to be divided fairly when I'm gone." But he smirked and shook his head. "Dad, you're old. What do you need money for? You're not going on cruises or buying fancy cars. You should just start transferring things to me now. It's not like you'll be around forever." That cut deep. It wasn't just greedy, it was cruel. The man I raised, the boy I once carried on my shoulders, was treating me like a piggy bank that was about to run dry. Sarah finally spoke up. She slammed her fork down and said, "Michael, do you hear yourself? You're talking about Dad like he's already dead. Have you no shame?" But Michael just waved her off. "Don't get dramatic. This is just reality. Besides, you don't need it. Your husband has a good job." At that moment, I excused myself from the table. I went into my study and closed the door. My hands were shaking. I could hear them arguing in the dining room. Sarah trying to defend me. Michael insisting he was just being practical. But all I could think about was Linda. What would she say if she heard him? She always believed in fairness, in love, in respect for family. And here was our son, dismissing all of that with arrogance. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in the quiet house. I couldn't sleep. His words kept replaying, "Your money is my money." I realized if I didn't act, he might actually find ways to take advantage of me while I was still alive. I'd heard stories, parents tricked into signing documents, accounts mysteriously drained, greedy relatives circling like vultures. So the next morning, I drove straight to the bank. I explained everything to the manager. I told her I needed to move my savings into a new account, one that only I had access to. No joint access, no shared signatures. She nodded and helped me set it up. Then I updated my will. I made sure that Sarah would inherit a fair share, and Michael, well, let's just say his entitlement cost him dearly. But here's where things got worse. Because when Michael found out, he exploded. He came to my house the following weekend, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. "What the hell, Dad?" he yelled. "You actually changed the accounts? Do you not trust me?" I looked him straight in the eye and said, "No, son. I don't. Not after the way you spoke to me. Respect is earned, and right now, you've lost mine." His face twisted with anger. He accused Sarah of poisoning me against him, said she was scheming to take everything. But Sarah had nothing to do with it. This was his own doing. That was the breaking point. That was when the drama really began. Family meetings, shouting matches, even threats of lawyers. And it all started with one simple, horrifying sentence. "Dad, your money is my money." When Michael stormed out of my house that night, I thought maybe he'd calm down. I hoped he'd think about his words, about how cruel he'd been, and maybe even apologize. But instead, things went from bad to worse. The very next week, I started getting phone calls from relatives. My sister phoned me, sounding worried. She said, "Why is Michael telling everyone that you've lost your mind?" I froze. "What are you talking about?" I asked. And she said, "He's been calling around, telling the family that you're too old to handle your finances, that Sarah manipulated you into changing your accounts. He's making it sound like you're not capable of making your own decisions anymore." I couldn't believe it. My own son, painting me as senile, as if I didn't know what I was doing. That cut deeper than any insult he'd ever thrown. I'd spent my whole life being careful, thoughtful, never reckless with money or choices. And now he was trying to discredit me to everyone I loved. Later that day, Sarah came over with her kids. She sat at the kitchen table with me and said, "Dad, Michael's not going to stop. He wants control of your money, and he'll twist every story to get it." I asked her, "But why, Sarah? Why would he stoop this low? He's my son." And she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Because he thinks he's entitled to everything. He's not seeing you as his father anymore, just as a wallet." That night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept hearing Linda's voice in my head, her warnings about not spoiling Michael. She always said, "One day, he'll take advantage of your kindness." And I had brushed it off. Now I saw how right she had been. A few days later, things escalated even further. Michael actually showed up at my bank. Yes, the bank. He tried to convince the staff that he needed access to my account. He claimed I was confused and that he was acting on my behalf. Thank God the manager had been with me when I set up the account. She called me immediately. I rushed down there, furious, my heart pounding like a drum. When I walked in, Michael was at the counter, raising his voice at the poor clerk. I stepped between them and said, "Michael, this stops now." He spun around, shocked to see me. "Dad, you're embarrassing yourself. You don't know what you're doing," he shouted. People in the bank started staring. My hands were trembling, but I stood my ground. "No, Michael, I know exactly what I'm doing. What you're trying to do is theft, plain and simple. If you don't stop, I'll call the police." The room went silent. Michael's face turned red, and he muttered something under his breath before storming out. The manager leaned over to me and whispered, "Mr. Parker, you may want to consider extra security measures." He seems determined. When I got home, the phone was ringing again. This time it was Michael, screaming through the line. "You humiliated me. You made me look like a criminal. I'm your son, and you're treating me like trash." I tried to stay calm, but my patience was gone. "Michael, a son doesn't betray his father. A son doesn't try to steal from him. Until you can understand that, you're not welcome in my home." There was silence. Then he hissed, "You'll regret this." And he hung up. A week passed. For a short while, things were quiet, and I thought maybe he'd finally realize the damage he was doing. But then I started noticing small things. One day, my mailbox was open, letters scattered on the ground. Another day, Sarah called and said someone had been asking questions about me in town, about whether I was fit to handle my affairs. It felt like Michael was building a case, trying to make me seem incompetent so he could get legal control of my estate. Sarah grew more protective. She came over almost every evening, bringing dinner or just sitting with me. One night, after the kids were asleep, she said softly, "Dad, you may need to consider a restraining order." I looked at her shocked. "Against my own son?" I asked. She nodded, her eyes heavy. "Dad, he's not acting like family anymore. He's acting like a predator." Her words pierced me. A predator. My son. I wanted to deny it, to believe that somewhere under all that greed was still the little boy who once held my hand on the way to school. But every day, Michael's actions made it harder to hold on to that image. Then came the worst betrayal yet. At the next family gathering, a birthday party for my grandson, Michael showed up uninvited. He walked in with a lawyer. A lawyer. In the middle of a child's birthday, he handed me papers right there in front of everyone. The papers were a petition. He was trying to have me declared legally incompetent so he could take over my finances. My own son, dragging me into court as if I were some stranger. The room erupted. Sarah snatched the papers from his hand and shouted, "How dare you? This is disgusting, Michael." Her husband stepped between us, ready to throw Michael out. But Michael just smirked and said, "I'm protecting Dad from himself. He doesn't know what he's doing anymore." I felt my knees go weak. My grandchildren were staring at me, confused and frightened. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about money anymore. This was war. The morning after the birthday disaster, I felt a mix of anger and disbelief that I still can't shake. Michael had crossed a line I never imagined he would. He wasn't just disrespecting me anymore. He was trying to destroy the life I had worked so hard to build. I called my lawyer immediately. I explained the situation, my son's threats, the bank incident, and the petition he filed. She listened carefully, her face serious, and said, "Mr. Parker, we need to act fast. This isn't just a family dispute anymore. It's a legal battle." I never thought I'd be sitting in a courtroom defending my own sanity against my child. But there I was, the following week, in a small, packed room filled with murmuring neighbors and relatives who couldn't believe what had happened. Michael sat across from me, smug as ever, with his lawyer whispering in his ear. My daughter sat beside me, holding my hand tightly. Her eyes were red from worry, but she tried to give me strength. The judge called the case, and the room grew silent. Michael's lawyer started first. "Your Honor, Mr. Parker's son has legitimate concerns about his father's ability to manage finances. Mr. Parker has made sudden, large transfers and changes to his accounts, which could indicate cognitive decline. We request that the court evaluate Mr. Parker's mental competence to manage his own assets." I couldn't believe it. My son was sitting there, accusing me of being incapable of handling my own life. I wanted to jump up and yell, "I'm the one who raised you, paid for your education, and worked my hands to the bone, and now you treat me like a fool." But I held back. I remembered Linda's advice. Control your anger, and the truth will shine through. When it was my turn, I spoke slowly, clearly, looking the judge directly in the eyes. "Your Honor, I am fully capable of managing my affairs. I changed my accounts because my son threatened me and tried to manipulate bank staff. This isn't about my competence, it's about his greed and entitlement. I love my son, but his actions are unacceptable." The judge nodded, seemingly taking note of my calm demeanor. Sarah added her statement next. "Your Honor, I have watched Michael act in ways that are manipulative and cruel. This isn't about protecting Dad from himself. It's about him trying to take what isn't his. My father is perfectly capable of handling his finances, and he has been careful and responsible his entire life." Michael scoffed, muttering under his breath, "You're just jealous because Dad trusts me more than you." I ignored him. Sarah and I had become a team. We had to be. Then came the turning point. One of the bank clerks who had witnessed Michael's attempt to gain access to my account was called to testify. She looked nervous, but her words were clear. Mr. Parker came in and requested a new account for his savings. He clearly understood what he was doing and why. Mr. Michael Parker attempted to coerce me into granting him access. It was aggressive, and I refused. I felt a surge of relief. The clerk's testimony was solid, undeniable. Michael tried to argue, saying she must be mistaken, but the judge asked if she had anything to gain by lying. She shook her head. No, Your Honor. I simply did my job and followed Mr. Parker's instructions. It was getting harder for Michael to keep his composure. His face flushed red, and he muttered angrily to his lawyer. This is ridiculous. Dad's memory has been slipping. Everyone can see it. At that moment, I realized something. I needed more than just words. I needed proof that I was still fully capable. I pulled out records from the past year, bills I paid, investments I managed, repairs I arranged in my home. I showed the judge statement from contractors, receipts, emails. Every document proved I was still in full control of my life and finances. The judge reviewed the documents carefully. Then came the question I had been dreading. Mr. Parker, do you understand the responsibilities of managing these assets? I looked at him steadily. Yes, Your Honor. I have managed these accounts for decades. I am responsible for my finances and my decisions. Michael shifted in his seat, clearly unsettled. He tried one last tactic, a burst of emotion. Your Honor, I just want what's best for Dad. He doesn't realize the risks. I'm trying to protect him. I took a deep breath and said, Your Honor, the only risk here is what my son would do if he gained control. This is not protection. This is theft disguised as concern. The judge leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. There was a long pause, a silence that felt like hours. And then he said the words I had been waiting for. Mr. Parker, based on the evidence presented and the testimony of credible witnesses, it is clear that you are fully competent to manage your own finances. The petition filed by Michael Parker is denied. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Sarah squeezed my hand, tears streaming down her face. Michael's jaw dropped, disbelief written all over his face. He had tried everything: manipulation, intimidation, legal threats, and yet here he was defeated. As we left the courtroom, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that justice had been served. Sadness that my own son had become so greedy, so unrecognizable. Sarah whispered, Dad, you did the right thing. You stood up for yourself. And in that moment, I realized something important. Protecting myself wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, respect, and teaching Michael that selfishness and betrayal have consequences. After the courtroom victory, I thought maybe things would settle. I imagined Michael would finally understand the message, that greed and disrespect come with consequences. But I was wrong. He didn't change. In fact, he became even more cunning. It started with subtle things. I began noticing that my mail was missing again. Bills arrived late. Packages that I knew had been delivered were lost. My phone rang with anonymous threats, people claiming they knew what Dad was hiding and warning me to hand over the money before it's too late. Every call, every missing envelope made my blood run cold. I knew it was Michael. I had no one else in mind. Sarah insisted on coming over every evening. She would sit with me, check all the locks, and sometimes even sleep in the guest room to make sure nothing happened during the night. Dad, she said one evening, we need cameras. We need security. He won't stop until he gets what he wants. I had to admit she was right. So I hired a small security company to install cameras and alarms. Michael reacted immediately. He started showing up at the front gate, arguing with the security guards, trying to convince them he had the right to enter my property. Each time, they called me before letting him in, and I had to refuse him politely but firmly. One Saturday afternoon, the most shocking event happened. I had gone to the grocery store with Sarah and the grandkids. When we returned, I found a note slipped under my door. It read, "You can't hide it forever. I'll get what's mine, Dad. Don't make me do something you'll regret." The handwriting was unmistakable. Michael. My heart pounded. I called the police, and they came immediately, taking the note as evidence. The officer said, "Sir, this is harassment. You have every right to keep him off your property, and if he continues, we can press charges." When I told Sarah, she was furious. I knew he'd escalate. He's dangerous, Dad. He's not thinking about you. He's thinking about what he can steal. I nodded. I had always trusted my son. I had always believed that love could fix everything. Now I knew some wounds can't be healed with love. Some have to be stopped. Michael's next move shocked me even more. He started spreading lies in the neighborhood, telling people I was unstable and managing my money recklessly. Neighbors I had known for decades began looking at me differently. Some whispered when I walked by. Some avoided eye contact. It was humiliating. One evening, as Sarah and I sat by the fireplace, she said, "Dad, you need to fight fire with fire. We can't let him ruin your reputation." I knew she was right, but I also knew it would be exhausting. I wasn't a young man anymore. Every confrontation with Michael drained me physically and emotionally. Then came the confrontation I had dreaded. Michael came to my house in person in the middle of a stormy night. He banged on the front door, shouting, "Open up, Dad. I know you're in there. You can't hide the money forever." Rain poured down, and the wind howled like it was echoing his anger. I refused to open the door. Instead, I called the police. By the time the officers arrived, Michael had calmed slightly, but his eyes were wild. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "You're going to regret this. I'm your son. You can't do this to me." I stepped forward, my voice firm. "Michael, you're no longer welcome in this house. You have crossed every line imaginable. If you care for this family at all, you will leave and stay away. Otherwise, I will take every legal action necessary to protect myself and everyone here." The officers escorted him away. I closed the door and sank into a chair, shaking. I felt both relieved and heartbroken. Relief that he couldn't hurt me tonight. Heartbroken that my own son had become so consumed by greed that he had lost all sense of family. The next day, I called my lawyer again. "I want a restraining order," I said. "He can't be allowed near me, my property, or my family." She agreed, saying it was the best step. Within days, the order was in place. Michael was legally barred from contacting me or coming near the house. It was a victory, but it was bittersweet. Sarah tried to comfort me. "Dad, you did everything right. You protected yourself and the family. Don't let him make you feel guilty for it." I nodded, but the sadness lingered. I missed the son I once knew. The boy who had held my hand, laughed at my jokes, and called me hero. That boy was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. In the following weeks, life slowly began to return to a semblance of normal. I focused on my grandkids, on reading by the fireplace, on small joys that reminded me of what really mattered. Sarah and I joked, we cooked together, and we laughed at memories that Michael would never understand. I realized something important during this time. Money is not worth sacrificing your peace of mind or dignity. The most valuable inheritance you can leave behind isn't cash. It's respect, love, and the lessons you teach about right and wrong. Michael hasn't completely disappeared from my life. I still get rumors from the neighborhood, whispers of threats, attempts to manipulate mutual relatives. But I am prepared. I have the law, security, and, most importantly, clarity. I know who I am and what I deserve, and nothing he does can change that. I've learned the hard way that family doesn't always act like family. Sometimes, the people you love most can become your greatest adversaries. But justice, patience, and courage can protect you, even against those who are meant to be closest to you. It took months for the tension in our family to ease, but slowly, the storm began to pass. The restraining order kept Michael away from me, my house, and my family. It was a bitter measure, but it was necessary. Every day without him felt like a small victory, proof that I could reclaim my life, my peace, and my dignity. I focused on the things that brought me joy. Reading in my favorite chair by the fireplace, listening to my grandkids' laughter, even taking long walks around the neighborhood. Sarah stayed close, helping me handle the small annoyances Michael had left behind. Suspicious calls, rumors, and neighbors who had been influenced by his lies. We faced it together, and slowly the tension lifted. Then came the first sign that karma was finally catching up with Michael. One morning, a neighbor knocked on my door. "Mr. Parker," she said, nervously, "did you hear about Michael? He got caught trying to embezzle money from his new job. They fired him immediately, and now he's facing legal charges." I couldn't help but feel a surge of vindication. After everything he tried to do to me, the threats, the lies, the attempts to manipulate banks and relatives, he was finally facing consequences for his own actions. I whispered to Sarah, "Sometimes life has its own way of balancing the scales." She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. Dad, justice really does come in its own time. As the months passed, Michael's presence in my life became a distant memory. The harassment stopped, the rumors faded, and in their place came quiet, peaceful days filled with the love and warmth of those who truly cared about me. Sarah and I grew even closer. She often told me, "Dad, you've taught me more than money ever could about strength, dignity, and standing up for what's right." And she was right. One afternoon, I received a letter from Michael's lawyer. He was seeking a settlement, trying to negotiate a small portion of the money he had once demanded. I read it slowly, then crumpled in my hand. I knew I had every legal right to refuse, and that's exactly what I did. Sarah and I agreed. He would get nothing, and I would not be drawn back into his schemes. I realized something important during this time. The real inheritance I leave behind is not my savings, not my bank accounts, not even the house. It's the lessons of fairness, respect, and courage. It's showing that even when people betray you, you can rise above their greed and remain true to yourself. The family slowly began to heal. Sarah and I hosted small gatherings with the grandkids. We laughed, we shared stories, and we created new memories free from Michael's shadow. I often caught myself smiling quietly by the fireplace, thinking about Linda. I imagined her smiling down at us, proud that we had survived the storm together. Michael's downfall became a cautionary tale for everyone who knew him. Some relatives expressed shock at what he had done, but most were quietly relieved that justice had prevailed. And while I would never forget his betrayal, I chose not to dwell on the anger. Instead, I focused on gratitude for my health, for Sarah, and for the family that truly cared about me. There were still moments of sadness, of course. I missed the son I thought I knew. The boy who once called me hero and ran into my arms after school seemed like a memory from another life. But I understood something essential. Love and family are not about blind loyalty. They are about respect, care, and honesty. When those are absent, no amount of blood ties can make up for it. In the end, the house was peaceful again. The grandkids played in the yard, Sarah prepared dinner, and I sat by the fireplace, reflecting on everything that had happened. The storm had passed, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to protect what truly mattered. My dignity, my family's well-being, and the lessons I leave behind. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Michael. I hope he learns from his mistakes. I hope he understands the value of integrity and respect. But even if he doesn't, I have peace. I know I acted with strength, with fairness, and with courage. I did what a father must do to protect himself and those he loves. And so life continues. Not perfect, not without memories of betrayal and greed, but full of love, laughter, and the quiet satisfaction that justice, in its own way, has been served. The lesson is clear. Family is precious, but respect is priceless. And those who try to steal it will one day face the consequences.